Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. Today we'll begin with verse 163 of Surah Baqarah and hope to cover until verse 185 inshallah. And our format will be the same. We will study sections of these verses and then once we are through with these sections, we will also take up the literal and idiomatic translation of these set of verses. So let us start off with verse 163, and you can see the verses being displayed right before you on the screen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa ilahukum ilahun wahid la ilaha illa huwa ar-Rahmanur Rahim. Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahar wal fulki allati tajri fil bahri bima yanfa'un nas وما أنزل الله من السماء من ماء فأحيا به الأرض بعد موتها وبث فيها من كل دابة وتصريف الرياح والسحاب المسخر بين السماء والأرض لآيات لقوم يعقلون. Believers, let them decide, and regardless of them, you should now fully understand that your God is one God. There is no deity but Him. He is profoundly compassionate. His mercy is eternal. There is no doubt that in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, and in the ships that sail in the ocean with cargoes beneficial to man, and in the water which God has sent down from the sky, then He has enlivened the earth after its death, and has created living beings of all kinds, and in the manifestations caused by the winds, and in the obedient clouds that are between the sky and the earth, there are many signs for men of intellect to understand this reality. So viewers, we also need to realize that with the previous verse, which is verse 162, the second section of the surah has ended. And near the end of this section, it was declared that a Muslim ummah has been constituted from the Ishmaelites. You will remember the verse, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا. And now with these verses, which is of course a set of verses which begins with verse 163, the directives of Abraham's religion are once again revived for this ummah. So in this section you'll find directives which relate to monotheism, and some of the other parts of the Sharia will be once again stated, so that the religion of Abraham is once again revived and presented to the Ishmaelites. And while stating these directives, negation is also made of the religious innovations which the Jews and idolaters had incorporated in religion. And you will see this as we move along in these verses. The important element that we need to note in verse 163, actually, we started off with verse 163, is that, it starts off with the assertion of monotheism. And as we know that monotheism is the founding bedrock of religion, the religion revealed to Adam, and right from Adam sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was the same religion. And that is why it is asserted at the beginning of this third section that the God of everyone is the same. Ilahukum ilahun wahid. So these believers, who have now been constituted from among the Ishmaelites, should have no doubt about it, and they should let the people of the book, whose charge sheet was presented before them in the previous sections, let them decide what they want to do. But as far as the believers are concerned, they should know that there is absolutely no compromise on this statement of monotheism. And then you can see that in the verses that we have just presented, that the pairs of opposite elements of nature are presented. So conflicting and opposing elements of this world are referred to, and simultaneously their mutual harmony and unity with respect to being beneficial for this world are referred to as well. So we have the earth, the samawat wal ard, which we have the earth and the heavens, then we have the night and the day, we have the sea and the ships that sail through it, and they are apparently conflicting and contradictory to one another. But when we reflect on all these diverse elements, we find that there is a tremendous harmony between the two pairs. For example, when the rain descends from the sky, it is only the inhabitants of the earth that benefit from that spell of rain. Similarly, the night and day, when they are considered together, they are a means of comfort and livelihood for human beings. So at night, the human beings, they fall asleep, they are tired, and the day beckons them to come once back to their own livelihood. And although the day and night, they are absolutely diverse, but they are actually functioning together for the harmony and for the mental upkeep and well-being of human beings. And then the ship that sails through waters with merchandise, and the water that comes out, comes down from the heavens and lightens up and revives the dead earth. It shows that how deeply everything of this universe is connected, although it may be it may look diverse. And we have to understand this, that the purpose that the Almighty has presented things in pairs has been delineated in one place in Surah Zariyat, where it says that وَمِن كُلِّ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, that we have created everything in pairs so that you may take heed. And what is that heed? That heed is that just as everything has a pair, this world also has a pair. And the pair of, or the other member of the pair of these two entities is the hereafter. So this world and the next world, they together complement one another. So importantly, we have to understand that the two members of a pair, they are like complements. They add and fill the vacuum which is found in the one, and the other ones fills it. So just as human beings are divided into man and women, so men and women, they complement one another. The earth and the sky complement one another. The night and the day complement one another. The purpose is to direct our attention to the fact that this world also has another entity, and together the two entities form a pair. So this world and the next world, they form a pair. And why is it that this pair is so evident? It is so evident because of the complementary nature that the two have. For example, you find imperfection in this world, you find a lack of justice, you find people not always winning reward for what they have done in a righteous way. So one big thing that is found in this world is this imperfection of justice, or the non-existence of justice in many cases. So apparently this has to be understood by viewing the hereafter or the next world in union with this world, and we are now able to understand that the two now complement one another, just as a man and a woman complement one another and bridge the shortcomings of one another. So that is why you'll find the Almighty presenting these things as pairs. And then another thing which is important here is the evidence for monotheism, that it is only a single intent which is governing the members, the opposite and the diverse members of the same pair, and bringing that harmony between them. So had the earth different gods, and for example the heavens would have a different god, the two couldn't have had such perfect harmony. It is only that single intent that creates that harmony. So just as this paired phenomena is an evidence for the hereafter, it is also an evidence for a single God, because only He could have made these two diverse and conflicting elements work for the harmony and unity of human beings. Now we come to the next set of verses, which starts with verse 165. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَّدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ وَلَوْ يَرَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا إِذْ يَرَوْنَ الْعَذَابَ أَنَّ الْكُفَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعَذَابِ. And in spite of these signs of the heavens and the earth, there are some people who associate partners with God. They love them as they love God, even though the believers love their God the most. And if these unjust people see the time when they will face torment, it will become clear to them that all might and power rests with God alone, and God is going to inflict a very harsh punishment on such people. So, as is evident from this verse, that in spite of the fact that such is the nature of God, that He is evident from every speck of this universe, every the object of this universe, the way it has been created and been looked after, and the way it has been created in pairs, so that the harmony between the two members of a pair is worked out by the Almighty. It shows that there is only one God. But if in spite of this people insist that they are not going to believe, as is the case here, that there are people who in spite of this they associate partners with God, in spite of the fact that they don't have any proof that God has created partners for himself. They are just imputing a lie to God, and that is why polytheism or shirk is called iftara. Iftara means a falsehood which has been imputed to God. So these are people who love their own partners. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. They love their deities as if they should have loved God, whereas the believers are such that they are ones who just love God Almighty alone. And this is a reality which will become evident on the day of judgment. When they will arrive there, they'll find that all their deities whom they banked upon, whom they thought would support them, would no longer be there. They would just vanish because they, in the first place, never existed. So all supports, all forms of help that they depended upon will not be there in any form. And then they will realize that what a blunder they had committed. And at other instances in the Quran, it has been cited that they would ask the Almighty to be given another chance, that they be sent back in this world so that they start believing in one God. And the Almighty says that even if He gives this chance to these people, they'll once again go back and do what they used to do, and they would indulge in polytheism. So such is the heinous nature of their crime, and that is why the Almighty says that on the day of judgment, you will see that for them is a shadidul azab, something which is a grievous punishment, something which is of a heinous nature. And then once we reach the day of judgment and it's the events that will happen, this is a very common style of the Quran, that then it starts to describe those events that will happen. So as soon as the day of judgment was mentioned, we now have these subsequent verses mentioning what will happen there. And what will happen there is now depicted. إِذْ تَبَرَّأَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا وَرَأَوُا الْعَذَابَ وَتَقَطَّعَتْ بِهِمُ الْأَسْبَابُ وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا لَوْ أَنَّ لَنَا كَرَّةً فَنَتَبَرَّأَ مِنْهُمْ كَمَا تَبَرَّؤُوا مِنَّا كَذَلِكَ يُرِيهِمُ اللَّهُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ. At that time, when those who were followed will disown their followers and will face the torment, and their ties will suddenly break. And those who followed them will say, "Would that we were given another chance to go to the previous world. Then we too would disown them as they have now disowned us." In this way, God will show them their deeds as nothing but longing to them, and they shall not be able to find any way to emerge from the fire. So at that time, when those who were followed will disown their followers and will face the torment, and their ties will suddenly break, and those who followed them will say that would that they had never been there and they would never have followed them. And this act of disowning them would be something which would be very telling upon them. They would get very angry that, well, we followed these people and now they are disowning us. So they would say that God give us another chance so that when we go back, we disown them as our deities, just as they are now disowning us as their followers. And then the Quran says, كَذَلِكَ يُرِيهِمُ اللَّهُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ, that their deeds will be nothing but longing, and they shall not be able to find any way, any headway to come out of the fire. وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ. This is a picture of their helplessness, that when they imputed falsehood to God, and when they deliberately, because you see, it's not just out of any confusion that they were engaging in polytheism. This could have been said before the arrival of the Prophet. But once the truth was conveyed, the Quran tells us that these disbelievers, especially the mushrikun, they were clearly aware of the fact that if they are associating partners with God, then it is something that they are doing deliberately. And similarly, we know that in the case of the people of the book also, when they were associating partners with God, for example, we know that the Jews of Arabia associated Uzair. They regarded Uzair or Ezra to be the Son of God, and the Christians regard Jesus to be the Son of God. So the Almighty has said in His book that these are the people who clearly know that God does not have a pair, but they still insist. And regarding the mushrikun, it is said at another instance that shahidina bil kufr, shahidina anfusahum bil kufr, that they will bear witness to their disbelief against their own selves. They will accept this, yes, we were the ones who indulged in polytheism without any proof and without any reasoning or argument. يا أيها الناس كلوا مما في الأرض حلالا طيبا ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين إنما يأمركم بالسوء والفحشاء وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون. People, the superstitions created by these leaders of yours on the basis of which you regard things as lawful and unlawful are absolutely baseless. So, eat of what is lawful and wholesome on the earth and do not walk in Satan's footsteps. He is your open enemy. He will only entice you to sin and lewdness and to ascribe to God what you know not. So we know this from our previous readings and of course some of the subsequent readings that are coming up in the Quran, that the people of the book and the idolaters both were guilty of the fact that they themselves would regard certain things to be forbidden and certain things to be allowed against what was, what they clearly knew were the precepts of the religion of Abraham. And that is why it is said that now that the Sharia has been revealed to this last ummah, to the Bani Ishmael, the Ishmaelites, now they should have no doubt about the fact that as far as wholesome things are concerned, as far as things which are clearly very in their own propensity, they are close to our nature, are concerned, they should be consumed without any guilt. So, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyibat, that whatever this earth gives out, you can eat of whatever it gives out, and do not walk in Satan's footsteps, because it was Satan who was responsible for declaring or causing people to come to this extent that they would declare certain things to be forbidden and others not to be forbidden. And the reason of this was that as far as their own life was concerned, they did not realize that the only Sharia or the lawgiver is God Himself. No one has the authority to pronounce something to be lawful or unlawful except God. So the word here used by regarding Satan is innama ya'murukum bis-su'i wal fahsha, and this is something very important, that he will entice you to sin. And there is no doubt in the fact that just as it means, and the word su, just as it means sin and misdeeds, it also means financial, physical, and various other forms of losses. And we know that this is something which Satan entices people to. He entices people to sin. And as the verse goes on to say, that he also entices them to lewdness, al-fahsha. And this, of course, means that he is someone who will drag you and entice you and lure you towards things which are lustful, which are against the precepts of decency, and he will try to make you wayward. He will try to make you establish extramarital relations. He will try to make you realize that, well, this world is all that there is and you must enjoy every single moment, and the only enjoyment that is of supreme enjoyment, as we can see from various other instances of the Quran, is sexual enjoyment and sexual profligacy, if you allow me to say, which means that uninhibited quenching of the sexual urge without realizing where to quench it from. So this is one of the greatest weapons of Satan, and we have already studied earlier on, dear viewers, in the first part or the introductory part of Surah Baqarah, that two of his greatest arrows or weapons that he is always going to throw at human beings, one of them is this arrogance. One of them is to become arrogant in matters, and he himself posed this. I mean, when Iblis, the person who was the first one to negate God, to negate prostrating before Adam, the Quran says the reason for that negation was aba was takbara, was istikbar, was arrogance. So it tells us that arrogance is something which is going to take the better of us unless we really control it. And the second thing, which is also evident from that portion, the earliest portion of Surah Baqarah, is that the second weapon that he's going to really fire with on all fours, as they say, is this weapon of enticing people towards sexual licentiousness and profligacy, and to quench their sexual thirst from all sorts of means, and not realize that the only legitimate means in this regard is through one's wife. But this is not what Satan is going to do. So that is why it is said that innama ya'murukum bis-su'i wal-fahsha, that such is his heinous nature, that he is going to entice you to all sorts of evil things, and especially the things which are to be understood here are which relate to lewdness and profligacy. And then the third thing which is mentioned is وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, which means to attribute something or to ascribe something to God that you know not. أَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And this is precisely what we call as religious innovation or bid'at. So religious innovation or bid'ah means that you regard something to be religion, something religious, something which has a religious import, to be religion without having any sanction from the Almighty. And this is one of the favorite pastimes of Satan, that he inveigles you, he lures you into such bid'ah. And we know that every time a person creates a bid'ah, one sunnah of the Prophet as a result is sacrificed, because in place of that bid'ah we had the established sunnah of the Prophet. So I think this is a very important verse that we are now studying, that أَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, that the three things which Satan does is إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُم بِالسُّوءِ وَالْفَحْشَاءِ وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, that he entices you to do sin, to indulge in evil, to do all sorts of bad things, for example, embezzlement, for example, fraud, cheating, disowning people in a way that, of course, they would never have ever understood, to the fact that they were close enough to be one's blood relatives. And then secondly, luring them into lustful activities, to lewdness. And thirdly, to bid'ah, which is to ascribe something to God of which they have no knowledge. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. And when they are invited to leave aside these concepts and follow what God has revealed, they say, "No, in fact, we shall only follow the path we found trodden by our forefathers, even in the case if their forefathers did not use their intellect in any way and were not guided." فَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And in reality, the parable of these people who have rejected in this manner to follow the path to which they were guided by the Almighty is like that of a person who calls out things which can hear nothing but shouts and cries. Is that of a person who calls out those things which can hear nothing but shouts and cries. They are deaf, dumb, and blind, so they understand nothing. So the important thing here that has to be understood here is that the biggest excuse that they would present in following these evils, in following their own religious innovations, in being polytheists, is that they would say that we have found our own forefathers doing this. So they would take refuge in the fact that how can we disown our forefathers? So whatever our forefathers did, we are only following our forefathers. And then the Quran actually rebukes them for this and says, أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. Will you still follow your forefathers if they do not use their intellect and they were not guided? So this is no excuse. This is absolutely no excuse to present that if you are going astray, then instead of using your own intellect and understanding, you start blaming or start saying the fact that we are only following the ways of our forefathers. So it is evident, dear viewers, from this very important section of verses is that how important it is to be responsible for one's own actions. We just cannot seek refuge in the fact that when we are born in this world and we follow a certain religion which is professed by our forefathers, by our parents, by our surroundings, that we start following it without even questioning it, or if a question arises in our mind, we just dismiss it by saying that because we are going to be answerable not for what we are following ourselves, but what our forefathers are following. So the Quran says that this will not work in the hereafter. Each person is going to be held answerable for what he or she would do. You just cannot say that I am following the religion of my ancestors. Ancestors are ancestors, they could be right and they could be wrong. And from here we also know the importance of what we call critical thinking. So critical evaluation of religious concepts is extremely important. And when something is done by your parents, for example, or the society around you, and you find it to be against the Quran, or maybe you think that it is, and when you do further research and you find out you are actually convinced, then it is an absolute given for you to follow what you have now found out as the truth. You just cannot say that you are going to follow what your forefathers have been following. So the Quran actually, through this example, tells us that every human being is answerable for what he or she is going to believe, and for that he or she should continue to critically evaluate what he or she is believing. So, of course, this is it's not being implied that you start off questioning everything ab initio and start off with that beginning like inventing the wheel, so to speak. No, what the important concept here is that whenever a question arises in your mind, or whenever someone raises a question before you that questions your beliefs, then it is here that the big test lies, that you have to reevaluate, rethink, and revisit what you believed. Yes, you can continue with that previous belief, but for that you need to be intellectually satisfied that the question that arose in your mind and the question which arose or rises or may arise in the mind of other people has been answered satisfactorily. So this is a very, very important lesson that these verses present. And moreover, they also say that the parable of these people is like those who have been guided by the Almighty, is like for a person who calls towards various people, and they are deaf and dumb and blind and they don't hear anything. Why? Because they do not use these powers or these faculties of intellect, the faculty of intellect, the faculty of sight, the faculty of hearing. They just turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to all these calls. And that is why the Quran says, Summum bukmun umyun fahum la yaqilun, that they are blind, they are deaf and they are dumb, and they are not going to understand anything, so you better leave them alone. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum washkuru lillahi in kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. Believers, if they are not willing to abandon their religious innovations, leave them to themselves and eat without any hesitation the wholesome things which we have provided you, and be grateful to God alone, if it is to Him only you worship. If it is only Him you worship, He has forbidden you only carrion, blood, and the flesh of swine, also any animal that is slaughtered in the name of someone other than God. Even then, whoever is driven to necessity, intending neither to desire nor to transgress, incurs no sin. Indeed, God is forgiving and ever merciful. So now comes this most important area which the Sharia has described, and it starts off with these dietary laws. So remember, this is the third section of Surah Baqarah, and in the previous section a new ummah was instituted, the Ishmaelites, and they were said that because of the fact that these Israelites did not prove worthy of the job that they were prescribed, now you are being given this duty. So once this duty was given to them, it was also important to revive all those precepts, all those directives of Sharia which had been trampled upon or distorted by the previous group, the Israelites in this case, and of course the Banu Ismail before them. So it is said that it is important that once this new ummah is instituted, then we will start off reviving those directives. And the start is now made with this very basic area which relates to our food and dietary laws. And why is it so important? So the reason that the intake of food or dietary laws are so important to human beings is that whatever one consumes, it has an effect on the person's personality. This is a given. And this is something so obvious. And now that in these modern times, we know the advancement of science has also substantiated this fact that what you eat and whatever you eat has an effect psychologically and physically on your own physical being. And it shapes your own ideas, it has its own effects. So the type of food that you eat is going to have its effect. And that is why it is very important that things which are wholesome, things which are pure, be eaten. And precisely for this reason, the Quran says that whatever is wholesome to you, it says to us in various other instances that whatever is wholesome to you, you don't need the Quran to enlist that wholesome food, that pure food for you, because our own human nature is perfectly equipped to find out what is wholesome and what is not. And the Quran actually tells us that there could have been 4 areas in which you could have faltered. And that is why the Almighty says that it is here that since there could have been a difference of opinion, so now in these 4 areas the Almighty is pronouncing His own verdict. And the important thing here which we have to understand is that basically the Almighty does not want us to eat food which can make us savage or which can create in us this urge to become savages. And for that, it has forbidden the food that is eaten by carnivorous animals, especially animals which eat meat, not just eat meat, but they cut open or they slit open the prey either through their claws or through their teeth, because this is like that beastliness which is found in them. So the Almighty wants that beastliness to not be in any way nurtured in human beings. So all animals which have that beastliness or the element of being a beast in them and a savage in them to not be consumed by human beings. And precisely that is the reason that human beings in the course of time, in the course of large amounts of historical epochs, they have not consumed lions and tigers and vultures simply because these are savage animals and birds, and they cut open their prey, they slit open their prey through their claws and through their teeth. And this is the pure savagery and beastliness which the Almighty doesn't want to be in any way inculcated in human beings. And it has innately given us this blessed inclination, as a result of which we don't consume these things in general. But there are areas in which there could have been some element of doubt, and that is why the Quran says that 4 areas in which you could have made a mistake are these areas that we are going to explain to you. And amongst these four areas, the first thing is إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ, which means the Almighty has forbidden the dead. I mean, you just cannot eat dead animals. And why is that? Because within those dead animals we have blood, and blood is a sign. If you start drinking blood, it is a sign of savagery. And we know that people who eat blood or consume blood or drink blood, our own human nature pronounces them to be abhorrent. So because of the fact that the dead body of an animal its vessels are still filled with blood, and blood itself is something which is again being independently placed right after maitata, when it is said ad-dam that we must not consume blood. So the second thing which is mentioned right after maita is dam, which is blood. So the first thing which is forbidden is dead, and that is because of the fact that a dead animal has blood in it, and that whenever you cut open that dead animal, it's going to flow out and you will have to consume that blood. And the second thing is blood itself, because here also a person could have faltered, and the Almighty has said no, even the blood which an animal carries is something that has to be purified from, and you cannot drink blood in any way. And the third thing which is mentioned is lahm al-khinzir, which is the flesh of the swine. So again, we know that generally carnivores have been forbidden, carnivores which cut open their prey, and herbivores which consume vegetation, they have been allowed. But in the case of the swine or the pig, the question that arose or could have arisen is that because pigs, on one hand, they consume meat, and on the other hand, they also eat vegetables and meat and vegetation and grass. So whether a pig or a swine should be classified as a carnivore or as a herbivore, as a meat-eating animal or as a vegetable-eating animal, and because of the fact is that it has both these abilities. So the Almighty gave His verdict in the Quran and said that, well, its carnivorous nature is dominant over its herbivorous nature. So it's more of a carnivore, it's more of an animal which has those savage instincts in which it bites open and cuts open its prey. So that is why lahm al-khinzir has been proscribed. People have come up with various reasons for the proscription of swine, but what the Quran tells us is that basically herbivores are vegetable consuming animals which are more close to our nature. For example, the sheep or the cow or the camel. So animals like these who consume grass and vegetation are the ones which are close to our nature, and hence they are allowed, as opposed against those which eat or consume meat, and not just meat, but eat their prey or the meat of their prey in a way that they savagely bite their prey and cut it open and slice it open either through their claws or through their teeth. And the fourth thing is وَمَا أُهِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ, that you should not eat any animal on whom any other person's name except God has been pronounced at the time of slaughter. This is absolutely imperative. So the first three, meat of a dead animal, blood, and the meat of swine, these are physical entities, though we have been prohibited from consuming them because of the savagery and beastliness it might instill in us. This fourth thing relates to our beliefs, and that is that we must not eat anything which has been slaughtered in someone else's name. The question is why? And this is extremely important because today we are living in the West and Muslims are living all over the world, in which, of course, this issue of halal food and this issue of zabiha comes up every now and then. So it needs to be once and for all understood very clearly, why does the Quran insist on the fact that you cannot eat or consume an animal which is slaughtered in anyone else's name but God. So you see, for this we have to understand that the Almighty says that taking the life of an animal is something we are not authorized. Even human beings are not authorized unless, except if they ask God's permission. And that permission is that they must slaughter that animal with the permission of God by pronouncing the takbir, or which is Bismillah Allahu Akbar. Now that you are slaughtering this animal, the Almighty says if you don't pronounce these words, it is like not seeking God's permission for taking the life of that animal. And if you do that, you are doing something which is beyond your jurisdiction. God has not allowed you to tamper with the life of even an animal, so let alone the life of human beings. So you see how important it is that the Almighty is stressing the fact that life is so important that even the life of an animal cannot be taken unless it is permitted by God, and that permission is through that takbir that we pronounce at the time of slaughter. So if we pronounce someone else's name or we pronounce no name at all, it means that we don't have the due authority to slaughter that animal. To positively have that authority is only understood when we pronounce the name of God at the time of slaughter. So people who do not pronounce any name, for example, we know today Christians do not pronounce any name while slaughtering. So therefore the food which is, or the animals which are slaughtered by them are by the same token cannot be consumed, simply because the life that they have taken, they were not authorized to take the life of that animal. And this actually throws light to a very great and a grand scheme that we have to understand. And that is basically the Almighty is stressing upon us that human life is so sanctimonious, it is so sacred, you cannot think about taking human life. Even animal life is something you cannot think about taking. So human life has utmost sanctity. Animal life also has utmost sanctity, but the only exception in the case of animal life is that because animals have been created by the Almighty for human beings, they can consume them, but with this condition that they must slaughter that animal with God's permission. So if they don't take His permission while slaughtering that animal, this would clearly mean that they are taking the life of a living being, even if it's an animal, that they were not authorized, giving us this huge impetus or this huge effect of the fact that we must understand how important life forms are. Human life is beyond question. Animal life, yes, you can use animals for your own consumption, but then that too with only God's permission. That is why it is so important, as the Quran has said, وَمَا أُهِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ, that whoever slaughters an animal in someone other's name, this is not at all acceptable, because you have to slaughter the animal in God's name. And because we are discussing this topic, let me also clarify that for the zabiha, one important area besides taking God's name while slaughtering an animal, the second important area is that the animal has to be slaughtered in a way that the blood absolutely drains out from the veins of the animal. And this can only be done if the animal is slaughtered at certain points of his body. Various animals have various points, but mostly it is the jugular vein, which when it is slaughtered or it is sliced open or cut open, then it is this impetuous reaction. This is like a involuntary reaction of the body in which all the blood is spilled out from the animal's body, and precisely then it becomes halal or consumable for human beings. So in other words, the two conditions for halal meat or zabiha is that first, we have to slaughter that animal in the name of God, and second, it is important that we slaughter that animal in a way that all the blood is drained out. And of course, we know that some very few drops might still remain in the veins, and that is why the Quran has said that daman masfuhan is something which is very important, which means that blood which is poured forth, you must let it go away, and something which is left sticking in those veins is something that you can clean up when you are making the meat of that animal. So that is not a problem. So these are the 4 prohibited items which the Sharia has mentioned. These are the dietary laws, and the Sharia that is being revived before the Ishmaelites is that these are the 4 areas which were already forbidden in the times of Prophet Abraham. They already know that this was something that they had to uphold, but in the course of time they lost some of these directives. So they are now being once again revived. So it's not that the Quran is presenting these 4 prohibited items for the first time. They are a pre-established sunnah in the times of Abraham. That was continuing from his times. It is only that now they are being revived, and they are being told that these are the areas. Generally, human beings don't falter in making a decision regarding halal food, because it's something which is halal is something which is known to human nature. These are the 4 areas where they could have faltered, and we know that Sharia generally guides us in areas in which human beings tend to falter. It does not guide us, it does not spoon feed us. It tells us to look ahead and to be guided in the light of our innate guidance. The Sharia only interferes where the Almighty knows that human beings can falter, and these were the 4 areas where they could have faltered, and He made it easy for us to decipher these 4 areas. Other than that, what is consumable and what is not consumable as human beings, we all know that. Our own nature is absolutely clear upon us as far as this food is concerned. And the last point is also very important, which these verses make, and that is that although these are prohibited items, these are prohibited food items, but if a person is driven to necessity, he is under compulsion, he has no way out to survive, then even these proscribed items, these prohibited items, they can be consumed, because the Almighty does not want you to go through this pain of death or impoverishment in which you don't have anything to eat but this. So the Quran says that as long as you don't desire anything or nor you cross the limits, then even food which is prohibited, these 4 types of food, it can be consumed if the issue is that this is the only food available. So now I will request you that if you have any questions regarding the verses that we have studied up till now, please raise them, because we have tried to stipulate some of the very important areas of Sharia, and we've begun with these dietary laws. And if you have any questions, please raise them.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, some people actually use this ayah وَمَا أُحِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ to make an argument that there are some famous religious personalities during their death anniversary and their birth anniversary. Some food is distributed on that, and they don't eat this food. They say that since this food is basically prepared in the name of these religious personalities, it's not prepared in the name of Allah. So it's not halal to eat that food, and they abstain away from that food. So is this a valid argument or no?
Well, it depends on how the meat was slaughtered. I mean, if the animal was slaughtered such that it was the name of God was taken on that animal, then the meat is absolutely fine. However, if the animal is slaughtered such that either the name of some revered personality was taken, or maybe it was said that we are now presenting this slaughtered animal as an offering to that revered personality, then of course that is something that should be abstained from. So it depends what they are doing. I mean, this is a area which has caused a lot of confusion, because a lot of people, I mean, they don't understand that it's not that they are dedicating any meat or food to any personality. In all probability, what they are doing on most occasions is that they are commemorating their life. I mean, they are celebrating their life, and it is not that they are sort of vowing or devoting that food. But then there are other people who actively do so. So I mean, it's a question of finding out from the person himself who is throwing this banquet, what exactly does he have in mind. If he's dedicated that food to a particular saint or a very prominent personality, then of course we must abstain from it. But if it's like slaughtered in the name of God, and all that you're doing is you're just celebrating the life of a person, as we generally do, then of course it bears no label of prohibition. But then there are people who, out of their own precaution, or their own temperament, they think that there's a gray area here, and we don't exactly know what they are doing. So it's better to abstain. So I have seen many people not going there for the want of this question that they might ask. So they are slightly shy to ask this question, and instead of asking and having it clarified, what they do is they think that since it's a gray area, so let's abstain from going to such places. So these are all kinds of attitudes that we can see. But in my personal opinion, if there is someone who has invited you, who is your close relative maybe, or someone that you know, there is no harm in asking what exactly is that person doing. And if there is no such thing involved, there is no harm in going. And if there is, of course, we might go there, but we should not consume the meat of that animal.
Mr. Nashad Shafkat, you may ask your question now.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. Sir, whether I'm talking about the killing of animals, you said that those animals slaughtered in the names of somebody else other than God. And then you said that the Christians don't take anyone's name. So would that also be haram? And the other thing is, with regard to taking lives, we kill so many cockroaches, insects. It almost happens daily.
Right.
Would that also fall in the category of taking a life which God has created? Obviously, we can't recreate even an ant ourselves. So that would be taking a life that God has created. Just a clarification on that, sir.
So the first question, the answer to the first question is that another instance in Surah Anam, the Quran has said that even if no name is taken, so there is one option or one situation is that you do not take God's name, but you take someone else's name. That is what is mentioned here in Surah Baqarah. That has been proscribed. But in Surah Anam, this verse has been repeated there, or at least referred to, and at that instance it is said that La ta'kulu mimma lam yuzkar ismallahu alayh, that do not eat in which God's name has not been taken, and any name has not been taken, which is left, you've not taken any name at all. Even that is something which is prohibited. So because the Christian world or the Christendom today, when they slaughter meat, it has two things attached to it. First, in some cases they use electric shocks, and they use the stunning method, in which the blood of the animal coagulates in the veins, and they don't let it flow out freely the way it should be. So that makes it, the first condition does not get fulfilled as a result. And the second is, of course, because of the fact that St. Paul very earlier on, he had revoked the Sharia. As far as the Jews were concerned of his own times, and still, I mean, even of today, they take God's name when they slaughter their animal. But since St. Paul did so very earlier on, that he had revoked the Sharia, and this practice of taking God's name in the last so many centuries has been discontinued in the Christendom as well. So therefore, the second condition is also not met. So neither do they slaughter their animal in a way that all the blood is drained out the way it should, nor do they take God's name, or in fact they don't take any name. So in both these instances, I mean both these important conditions which makes a meat halal or consumable, they are not met, and therefore that is why it is inadvisable that meat which has been prepared by these Christians should be not consumed. But at the same time, let me also tell you that in New Zealand and in Australia and in some food chains in the US, they specifically prepare halal food and they certify it as halal food, and they say that the name of God was taken, and they also say that as far as the blood was concerned, it was properly drained out, because of the fact there is a growing clientele of Arabs and many other Muslims who are settling in so many parts of the world. So now I know personally in Australia and in New Zealand there are chains which are actually supplying halal meat, and similarly there are slowly and surely chains coming up in the US and the UK also which supply certified halal meat, although they are ones which were originally originated by the Christian world. Your second question, you see what the Almighty has said, that animals which are used for the purpose of consuming, for the purpose of eating. So these are dietary laws related to eating. So as far as killing animals is concerned, for example, you step on ants, we step on at times we kill animals which might be detrimental or harmful, for example, cockroaches or insects which might produce diseases. So killing them is fine because they are harmful for mankind. But other than that, there are animals or there are insects which are harmless, for example, ants. Yes, we should avoid, stepping deliberately on ants, because this is of course that we should make sure us of. But when it cannot be avoided, for example, when you're walking in a garden or when you're walking on a road, this is something which is simply not possible for you. For all such things, you are not accountable. But wherever you can, you must avoid killing life forms without any need. The need could only be first that you are killing it for the purpose of consuming it, or the need could be that the animal is a harmful animal and it's going to cause nuisance. Or, there are certain animals who might not be harmful, but they cause nuisance. For example, the flies. And there are some other animals who just come and become a nuisance for human beings. So that they too can be taken care of. But needlessly killing animals is something which is again proscribed. And let me also mention here, because you have raised this topic, that people who go for hunting, so this is, to my mind, it doesn't play well, or it doesn't sit in the temperament of the Sharia, that you go and start hunting for animals for the purpose of gamesmanship, for the purpose of your own pleasure. Yes, hunting animals for the purpose of consuming their meat, that is fine, but simply going and playing this hunting game that many of us do is something which somehow I don't feel comfortable with.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. You clarified this point, was also bothering me a lot, and thank you very much for the clarification. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question about creation of pig. Why did God create creation of pig? Why did God create pig with these confusing traits when God had to guide separately about the dietary laws?
You see, God has the scheme of God is not on the basis of providing ease for you in judgment. It is based on trial and test. And at the same time, wherever there is a trial and test, there is guidance is guidance available for you. So it is like this trial and test, that you are being told that this is an animal that you should not go near. And at the same time, you're given this free will. So basically, God is checking your free will, whether in spite of stopping you from doing something, whether you persist in that or not. This is precisely what we call trial. So the Almighty has thrown the bait. It is like telling you that yes, Satan has made these things, or all these things he's made available for you, not just in the case of food, but there are so many other allurements. There are so many other attractions which are, not prescribed by the Sharia, but they are made available. So God has let them come into being, and He has in fact created some of them Himself. And the purpose is that He has given us this free will, and He has also given us this choice that we can go this way or we can go that way. So He wants us to abstain from such things out of our own free will, so that we become individuals who pass this test. So basically all this has been created, as we know, that the free will of man or free will of human beings is to have it tested and see whether they out of their own will, whether out of their own volition and their own resolve, they abstain from things or whether they fall prey to them.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Akram Bhatti, you may ask a question now.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, out here in West, a lot of people, they go eat meat from the grocery store. And once I found out that Arab people mostly do that. And I was told that the Imam of a big mosque, he's been found in grocery store eating. So I had an elderly person working for me. I asked him, he was Arab. He asked him, he said, yeah, Quran says that all the halal animals are halal, are edible. So that's why we do that. And he said that he also knows that Imam does that. Whereas
So
when I asked my own Imam, he says, the best thing is to go to Jewish butcher shop and buy food from there. They kill in the name of Allah. Then I tried to find out. I could not find a butcher, so they were mentioned, they were not there. Then I found out, like you said, there are a lot of big markets. They get their meat from New Zealand and Australia, and it is certified by couple of organizations here in America. They certify the halal. They're stamped halal, and they're certified by that organization. So we utilize that. So question is that is that true that most Arabs go to that, refer to that ayah that's mentioned in Quran, that all the halal things are halal for you?
Right. So you see, they take, they use this verse of the Quran in Surah Ma'idah, which says, Al-Yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat wa ta'amul lazina utul kitaba hillul lakum, that the food of the people of the book is allowed to you, is something that you can consume. But you see, the context of the verse is that the people of the book in those times, they slaughtered their animals in the name of God. So, if they are not following their own religion, then obviously this cannot be allowed. So the people of the book in those times, they had started to slaughter the animals in the name of God, and the Jews, they still do so, and that is why their kosher meat that you find available in the US and so many other Western countries is something which Muslims can consume without any problem. But as the people of the book, the other section of the people of the book, which are the Christians, although we have this verse which is found in the Quran, that the meat or the food of the people of the book is allowed, but that verse actually occurs in this context, that these people of the book are now consuming the meat in a way that was originally destined for them, and that is that they are following the laws, the dietary laws, which is that they are slaughtering the meat in the name of God. But today, of course, we know that this doesn't happen anywhere in the Christian world. So therefore, this should not be a cause of consuming meat. And the second thing that you will find them using is that at times what they do is they just pronounce Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at the time of eating. So remember this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is to be pronounced, it is called actually tasmiyah in Arabic language. Tasmiyah is something which is specifically prescribed at the time of the animal slaughter. It is not something to be done at the time of that you're starting to eat the meat of that animal. So tasmiyah is a practice which means that at the time that you are slicing open that animal, at that time you have to say tasmiyah. At that time you have to say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. So, they think that this is something which is an optional thing. If you don't do so, then it is fine. This is the opinion of Imam Shafi'i, by the way. So, because of a lot of the Arabs which reside in the US, they follow Imam Shafi'i So therefore, they consume the meat of these food chains, which to my understanding are not halal.
Yeah, yes, that's what I was referring to without mentioning Imam Shafi'i. You are correct. People who call Imam Shafi'i, they do that.
Right.
And also, anyway, that's what it is. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Saqib Khan, you may ask a question now.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर मेरा सवाल है नज़र और न्याज के फ़र्क के बारे में, क्योंकि नज़र के बारे में तो ये कहा जाता है कि ये अल्लाह के लिए है, लेकिन न्याज के साथ जो है वो कुछ शख्सियात के नाम बाकायदा अटैच किए जाते हैं और ये कहा जाता है कि ये न्याज जो है वो फलां शख्सियत के नाम पे हम कर रहे हैं, और उनको जस्टिफाई करने के लिए फिर दलील ये दी जाती है कि ये शख्सियात जो हैं ये गैरुल्लाह नहीं हैं, बल्कि ये अल्लाह ही वाले लोग हैं, तो इसलिए न्याज जो है वो हम बाज़ शख्सियात के नाम पे भी कर सकते हैं, और जिसमें एक मशहूर जुमला भी है कि नज़र अल्लाह और न्याज के साथ फिर एक ख़ास शख्सियत का नाम भी लिया जाता है, तो इसको ज़रा फ़र्क को वाज़े कर दीजिए।
So basically, there is no difference between the two. Whether you dedicate the food to some saint, or whether you use the word niyaz for that, or whether you use the word nazar for that, this is exactly the same. You cannot dedicate the food to anyone else except to God. And because God says that if you do so, then this amounts to polytheism. God is the only person whose name has to be taken at the time of that consumption or at the time of that slaughter. And as far as this issue is concerned, that you are taking the name of people who are close to God, this is just a lame excuse that people have worked up. I mean, whether they are people who are awliya, whether they are people who are closer to God, they are still not God. I mean, they are God's servants. So you just cannot equate them to God. So I think that it is a very, very naive explanation that people tend to offer. The Quran is absolutely clear that all offerings, you see, what we have to also understand, that this is precisely what the mushrikun used to do in their own times. So they would slaughter various animals and they would say that this is for such a deity, this is for such a person. So they would use the word nazar for exactly this. The niyaz is something of this is a word of our own language. It's not used in the Arabic language. This is a word of the Urdu language implying the same meaning. So basically, in the Arabic language, there is just one single word, and that is nazar. And nazar means to devote something to some person. I mean, it could be God, it could be any other person. So our religion has clarified that devotion of food can only be for God. So the difference is, more of a language. The word niyaz is not used in Arabic. It's just an Urdu word, and it's just a synonym for nazar. So that is why this confusion has arisen. Otherwise, virtually they mean the same.
Shukriya, sir.
Thank you. Adil Qureshi, you may ask your questions.
So you said kosher is halal. It would imply that the person who is doing the slaughter has to believe in God, and he has to or she has to say certain specific words at the time of slaughtering. So does this mean that the person who's slaughtering also needs to believe in God? He or she cannot be an atheist or Hindu or something?
That is precisely one thing that has to be mentioned as well, that the person who is slaughtering cannot be a mushrik or a non-believer. He has to be a monotheist. So because Jews and Christians, especially Christians, since they indulge in certain forms of polytheism, but because they are regarded as monotheists, so food which is slaughtered by them, it fulfills this condition that they are monotheists. Now, for example, if food is slaughtered by a Hindu, some animal which is slaughtered by a Hindu who subscribes to polytheism, then even if the animal is slaughtered in a way that God's name is maybe taken in some way, or the animal is slaughtered in a way that the blood flows out, that would not still fulfill those conditions. But because this is a given condition, this is like a precondition, that the person who is slaughtering, he's not only to take God's name, and not only he must let the blood flow away, he has to be a monotheist. And Christians are monotheists, Jews are monotheists, and of course Muslims are. So anyone besides them has to profess, he cannot be a non-monotheist. And if there is a person who is a non-monotheist, is slaughtered an animal, then that would not be acceptable.
So the second question is about the animal rights. You mentioned hunting is something that you also think is against the animal rights. What about these zoos that we create where we cage the animals for years?
I also am very against them. I think that any pet animal or any publicly caged animal for the purpose of amusement of human beings is something that we must revisit. Yes, if we maybe cage animals such that we do not change their habitat. You see, every animal has a habitat. So if we are able to replicate that habitat in a very decent form, maybe there could be some possibility. But in normal circumstances, we do not create that habitat. We are caging monkeys, we are caging lions, we are caging so many animals, and it's like depriving them of their natural habitat, and it does look very cruel to me. And in fact, this is about a couple of years ago, when COVID was at its peak, I gave a lecture and I said that, look, maybe God is also, I mean, amongst other things that He would like to teach us, He's also teaching us this, because you see, during those times, as you all know, we were confined to our homes, and it was only for some pressing need that we could go out, and even that was also not recommended. And we were virtually caged in our own homes. And this actually really struck a chord with me, and I thought that, look, maybe God is also telling us that we ourselves would never prefer to be caged like this, and we are very uncomfortable. But what we are doing at a global level is that we are caging animals, we are not fulfilling their rights, we are depriving them of their habitats, and this is especially true for birds, for example. I mean, we have people who keep birds in their homes, let alone in a zoo. I don't even think that the zoo is providing that habitat. But yes, surely homes are certainly not providing those habitats because of that small cage in which they put those birds. So I personally think that this is something that human beings need to revisit and re-question themselves, that what they are doing is, it seems to be a very, very blatant violation of human rights, of animal rights. So let's move on to the next section of verses. These are verses 174 and 175. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزل الله من الكتاب ويشترون به ثمنا قليلا أولئك ما يأكلون في بطونهم إلا النار ولا يكلمهم الله يوم القيامة ولا يزكيهم ولهم عذاب أليم أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى والعذاب بالمغفرة فما أصبرهم على النار. These people of the book knew that this only is the truth, but they concealed it, referring to the fact that whatever is forbidden and whatever is not forbidden is clearly mentioned. And as we will see later on, the Quran says, "Fatu bit Tawrat fatluha," that bring forth the Torah if you think that some of the things that are forbidden, that you have forbidden, are also forbidden in the Torah. So it is said that in reality, those who conceal the law, God is revealed, and in exchange for this, they gain some meager wealth of this world, swallow nothing but the fire of hell into their bellies. On the day of judgment, God shall neither speak to them nor purify them, and a woeful punishment awaits them there. It is these people who bought guidance for error and forgiveness for punishment. So how audacious are they in the matter of putting up with hell? Again, this is something which is one of the crimes of the people of the book, which is mentioned several times in the Quran, that they would conceal the reality. At times they would not let reality come out. And this is a very special feature which the Quran is mentioned elsewhere. For example, in Surah Anam, when we get there, we'll know that the way the Torah was compiled by the Jews was that they did not have it in a book form, which is like a bound book. It was compiled in the form of pages, karatis, as the Quran says. And the Quran says that they would hide some of these pages and they would expose some of them. And the way it has mentioned this, it shows that a very better part of the Torah they would hide, and some of them they would reveal. So we know from our knowledge of history and the Old Testament that the Jews did not allow the Torah to be popular amongst the masses. So their scholars would say that if you have to study the Torah, you should come to us. And people would go to them and they would teach the Torah. And of course, as the Quran says in Surah Anam, they would conceal parts of the Torah because, as I said, it was not bound in the form of a volume or a book. It was in the form of script, of the form of pages or scrolls, and they would just present that part before their masses, which they wanted to, and others they would conceal. And in this way, they concealed a lot of things which went against them, their own interests. They became rich. They filled their pockets with the money of people. They collected their dues. They were the ones who said that, well, there is no such thing as the final prophet or another prophet coming. They would hide these predictions. They would change these predictions. So you have to understand the background as well, that the Torah was concealed by these scholars, and that is why the Quran is mentioned that their scholars, which the Old Testament mentions as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were the ones who were really guilty of these heinous ascriptions towards Scripture. So the Almighty says that those who do this, what are they doing? Ulaika ma ya'kuluna fi butunihim illa an-nar. They are just swallowing fire in their bellies. Such is the heinous nature of what they are doing. And remember, when they do, and when they arrive on the day of judgment before God, God is not going to speak to them. La yukallimu Allah yawm al-qiyamah wa la yuzakkihim, nor will He purify them, which means that any semblance of evil that is left in them would not be in any way, even if it is there, it would not be purified by the Almighty. And then it says, walahum azabun alim, that for them shall be a grievous penalty, and they should realize that they have earned misguidance, or they have bought misguidance in lieu of guidance. This is the trade they have made. And the Quran says, Ulaika allazina ishtarawu dalalata bil huda, that they have bought misguidance. They have forsaken guidance, and in its lieu, they have bought misguidance, and wal azaba bil maghfirah, and instead of buying God's maghfirah or forgiveness, they have bought His punishment and torment. And fama asbarahum ala nar, these are words of tremendous rebuke in the Arabic language, and they mean that how audacious have they become. Fama asbarahum ala nar, that they are putting up with hell. They think that, well, whatever is going to happen, they are going to tolerate that, but they don't know that they will not be able in any way to tolerate the fire of hell. And zalika bi anna Allah nazzala al-kitaba bil haqq wa inna allazina ikhtalafu fil kitabi lafi shiqaqin ba'id. This will happen because God revealed this book of His with the decisive truth. But these people who have differed regarding this book have gone far in their obstinacy. So another very important point which the Quran has made, that they have gone very far in their obstinacy. What is that? And that obstinate and stubborn behavior is that, in spite of being convinced of its veracity, they would not give an iota of importance to that book. They would say that we are not going to believe in it. We are not going to believe in the last prophet. That is what the Quran says, that who have differed in their own book, they have gone to such extreme, they have gone to such heights in their animosity, and therefore they are not going to come back in any way. And this is a very, very sorry state of affairs, but then it is not something which has been heaped upon them in any way. It is something that they did to themselves. And then ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والكتاب يوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. This is a very, very profound verse of the Quran, one of the exemplars of how the Almighty has presented the character of believers. You'll find such verses being interspersed in the Quran. And here you'll find right in the middle of these directives of the Sharia that are being revived to the Bani Ishmael, it has been once again placed. And the background is the same, that facing the east or the west, which is actually implying the fact that doing some apparent rituals is not going to bring you closer to God. So al-birr actually is a word which means to be faithful to God, to be a person who is going to observe certain rites and rituals, and who is absolutely sincere in his duty towards God, or in other words, he is loyal to the Almighty. So al-birr means loyalty. So it is being said, they think that the duty imposed on them of being loyal to God is fulfilled by merely observing certain rites and rituals. They should know that loyalty to God does not merely mean that you face the east or the west in the prayer, but loyalty is the loyalty of those who believe in God with all their heart, and in the last day, and in the angels of God, and in His books, and in His prophets, and who, in spite of their love for wealth, spend it on kinsfolk, the orphans, the destitute, the traveler, and on those who ask for the liberation of necks, and who are diligent in the prayer and pay zakah. And loyalty is the loyalty of those who, when make a promise, fulfill it, and especially of those who are steadfast in scarcity, illness, and in times of war. These are the people who are truthful to God in fulfilling the promise of loyalty to Him. And these are the ones who are in fact God conscious. So here is the verse, dear viewers, that you can see its comprehensive nature, its all-embracing nature. It encompasses almost everything from faith to morality to the fact that we are all people that have to follow certain precepts of the Sharia. So it encompasses all these things, and it starts off with the fact that you believe in God the way the belief in God is stipulated. The day of judgment, the angels, the book, and the prophets of God. So all these are the precepts of belief that we know have been mentioned at several instances in the Quran. So it's like a motto, it's like a manifesto that we have before us, that to believe in the last day, to believe in God, to believe in the angels, to believe in the books, and also to believe in the hereafter. This is something which the Almighty says, that if you are trying to hoodwink God by fighting with each other over directions of east and west, then this is not what loyalty is. If you are really loyal servants to God, if you are loyal to the cause, then you must remember that the crux of religion lies in these beliefs. And not only this, it says, وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, that you dispense wealth in spite of the fact that you might need it, in spite of your own want. And where do you dispense that wealth? Zawil Qurba. You see, this is the first thing that is mentioned, and I think this is an area that I need to stop a little more here and caution each one of us that the Quran is so very telling in these areas. It says that the first recipients of your charity or your wealth are your own relatives. And these include all relatives. They include blood relatives. They can include parents. They can include siblings. They can include children if they are in want. So look how the Quran starts off. It says that your wealth, which you are going to give as charity to other people, the most deserving of this wealth are your relatives. Zawil Qurba, they are blood relatives. Wal Yatama, of course, the orphans, the destitute, the people who travel. In those days, traveling was a very difficult scenario. People would go there. There were no hotels. There were no places where they could stay. They were left to the mercy of the people who would live there, and they would provide food to such people. So that is why traveling would be a very difficult and a serious affair. And then for the people who would ask, and for the emancipation of necks. So we've already spoken of the fact that how important the Quran is made this campaign of releasing the necks, or the institution of slavery, which existed in the times of the Prophet. At the times of Quran's revelation, the Quran made a gradual strategy to eliminate the institution of slavery, this inhuman institution of slavery, and it did so with a very concerted effort. So the money that is being used, the Quran says, besides these causes, must also be used for the emancipation of slaves. And then two important rites and rituals are mentioned. وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَى الزَّكَاةَ. So you will see that several times that the salah and zakah are mentioned together. They are like they work in tandem. They are like they work as complements to one another. So one of these rituals, which is the salah, it cements our relationship with God, and the other one, which is zakah, it establishes and cements our relationship with God's creatures, with our brethren. So that is why both of them are generally mentioned together. And then a very important sector, of our life is mentioned. Wal mufuna bi ahdihim iza ahadu, that when they make a commitment, when they make a promise, they fulfill it come what may. Once they give their word, they don't go back on their word. And this is an area that we all need to work on, that either we don't give our word, or if we give our word, then we have to be true to our words. We must never go back unless there is an emergency or something which we cannot help. In that case, we must bring it to the notice of the person with whom we made that promise. Otherwise, promises have to be kept. And we also know that the biggest promise that human beings have made is the promise of fulfilling the rights of God, which is this religion that has been given to them. And that is why this is called the Misaq. It's called the covenant between God and His creatures. So religion itself is a promise that we have made with God. And as a result, we have given this commitment that this is the covenant that we would like to follow and never ever go back on this covenant. And then وَالصَّابِرِينَ فِي الْبَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَحِينَ الْبَأْسِ, that these are people who remain steadfast in scarcity. I mean, when there is scarcity, when there is famine, بَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ, and when there is illness, and when in times of war. So these are the three very, very prominent areas of affliction that all of us go through. At times we are scarce in our sources, at times we are afflicted with illness, at times we are in an area or a war zone. All these areas require steadfastness and patience, and God says that these are the people, wasabirina, they are steadfast. They are not people who just give up. They in the wake of all these adversities, in the wake of all these calamities, they stand up to these calamities. They fight these calamities, and that is what perseverance and sabr actually means here. And then finally it is said, ulaika allazina sadaku, that it is these people who are in fact the ones who should be called truthful, sadaku, and ulaika humul muttaqun, these are the people who are God conscious. So you see, this verse 177 has occurred in between these directives that we are given in the following verses, which we will study next week, inshallah. We will find some other directives of the Sharia being given, but right in between, this verse is juxtaposed. It is placed between various sets of Sharia verses, in which it is said that always think that loyalty to God is not going to be extracted out of certain rituals and following those rites without following the Spirit. And if you want to become loyal to God, if you want to know what the true Spirit is, then this is the essence of religion, that you have to be truthful, you have to be, and a person who is always caring and affectionate, who is always believing in God, and who is a person who, in spite of all his scarcities and all his shortcomings, always turns to God whenever the need arises.